Welcome back, everyone, to the College Sports Hive. That is Leif and I am Scott Stevens. We're coming to you on Monday today because it's going to be a funky schedule, funky outlook moving forward with college basketball and college football going to be happening this week. We have some great college basketball games that we are going to be covering for all of you. This is our first episode talking basketball, so this is a college sports podcast, not just college football. So as things continue to play and continue to pick up, we'll start covering them and talking about things that people want to hear about. So as of right now, we have Feast Week approaching for basketball. So some really good matchups to look at in the top 25 there for this week. Like football, we're going to bring you news, previews, and recaps of things that happen throughout the spectrum of the college basketball landscape. But unlike football, it's not going to be it's not going to be a 3-episode a week schedule because games happen pretty much every day for college basketball and things can happen differently. So we'll do 2 episodes a week of giving you news, giving you previews of games to look forward to for the next few days, and then recaps as well during those games during that time of games that have already happened from the last previews. So it's gonna be a fun schedule to keep up with and make sure to follow along with our Twitter, Instagram, everything to make sure you're aware of when episodes are going to be coming out. Last season, on March 12th, the college basketball conference tournaments were all canceled, and for a few hours after that, March Madness was canceled as well due to coronavirus. So because of this, we do not have a new champion. So the Virginia Cavaliers are still the defending their title. Leaf, what do we think about that for the 2020?
I mean, I was devastated to not have March Madness. It was crushing, and I'm sure a ton of fans that were. And so, like those same fans, we're excited to bring you some college basketball content along with college football. So the Virginia Cavaliers look to defend their crown, and they look better equipped this year to do it than they did last year. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise for them, but I'm sure they would have liked to play basketball in March Madness nonetheless.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, some big news out of the NCAA. November 16th, as of November 16th, the NCAA announced that they're relocating the preliminary NCAA tournament sites to one location, that the NCAA staff is in the preliminary talks with the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis. Indianapolis was previously scheduled to host the Final Four. So it seems to me like this is happening to kind of create sort of a bubble scenario for these tournaments and things like that. Is that kind of what's happening with these talks and changes?
Yeah, for sure. And I think basketball, we've talked about in football how it's hard to create a bubble for so many people, but in basketball, that is exactly what they want to do. They saw the NBA do it. They saw the basketball tournament, one of former college players and professional players overseas constructed a successful tournament. And so I think the NCAA is trying to do the exact same. And in this case, they're using Indianapolis as the host city, which I think is pretty apt. They're a city rich with basketball tradition, and I'm really rooting for Hinckley Fieldhouse to get the old Final Four. Just a nice little, for those of you who are familiar, that's where Hoosiers plays their playoff game. So I'm excited. I'm excited, and I really hope that March Madness is able to happen despite a pandemic, and the NCAA and the coaches are really trying to make this happen. And Mike Krzyzewski, Duke's head coach, one of the big marquee programs, obviously said there's no way March Madness doesn't happen twice in a row. So that leaves me to be optimistic, and we'll try to provide you every update that we can find about how the season's progressing.
Yeah, to keep everyone in the loop, we'd usually be about 3 weeks into the season as of right now so far for the college basketball season. And so it's very interesting to see where we are now due to shortened seasons and different scheduling due to COVID-19 issues. What do you have to say as to that, and what do you think that's going to impact the teams at all?
Yeah, so I mean, typically, like you said, we'd be 3 weeks in, and Feast Week today is Monday, and so right before Thanksgiving, that's when Feast Week starts. And teams are just starting to find their groove. They played a lot of big time names, especially power conferences. Will play a lot of power conferences, and then the Feast Week is a loaded tournament schedule, headlined by Bad Boy Mowers, a Battle for Atlantis, and Maui Jim Classic in Hawaii. But this year, because of some traveling restrictions and a lot of fear of contracting the virus, a lot of teams they're starting their season with these tournaments, but also a lot of teams are skeptical of playing in a tournament setting. So there's some different names in these tournaments, and I'm curious to see where teams are at, both offensively and defensively, because of shortened training camps. But also that in basketball, it's not like football. You don't need to build up as much physicality. There might be better execution because that's all you can do during some of these times where they couldn't get in near each other. There's no scrimmages for a period. So I think the defenses will be ahead of the offenses to begin this season, but empty gyms are conducive to shooters. So you might see some really high shooting numbers for some teams that like to splash from the outside.
Yeah, you touched on some of these different changes. Do you have any other thoughts about how this season's going to look different compared to previous seasons?
Well, I mean, I think fans is a huge deal because in basketball, you're inside a dome. Some places are huge, like the Carrier Dome for Syracuse, or Cameron Indoor Stadium is a really compact, but they're both horribly difficult places to win. And this year, there's probably going to be no fans other than friends and family in almost all stadiums across the country as we see it right now. So I think that's the biggest change. And then just whoever's healthy has the best chance. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds.
What about this weekend in particular? Do you think there's going to be ill effects of like less practice, less time to gel with one another, anything along those lines, or do you think, especially with a game that we see or already on the docket with Kansas and Gonzaga, do we think that's going to have any impact because that's a top 10 matchup?
Yeah, no, I think neither team will be incredibly sharp, but these are two of the best teams and best programs historically, at least in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I think neither team's going to be as sharp on offense or defense for that matter, just because they haven't played anyone other than themselves. But I expect these two teams to put on a good show and play a high-level basketball game regardless, just because of the talent level and the respect I have for the coaches, Mark Few of Gonzaga and Bill Self of Kansas. So I think this game may actually be pretty exemplary of what we'll see down the road, and both of these teams will improve. But I don't foresee this game in particularly being as sloppy and showing of the effects of lack of practice.
For sure. Let's dive into that preview for everyone right away. That game's going to happen on November 26th there at Suncoast Arena at 1:30 Eastern time on Fox. That is number 1 Gonzaga taking on number 6 Kansas. Let's hear some of your just preliminary thoughts and opinions on what these teams look like coming into this matchup.
Yeah, no, this is a marquee matchup any time in the season, especially on opening night, long anticipated. So I'm really excited. Gonzaga is a run and gun type team. They dominate the WCC yearly, but they bring back a lot of talent even after losing a lot. They lost WCC Player of the Year Filip Petrusev, Killian Tilly to the NBA, and Admon Gilder, Ryan Woolridge. They lost a lot of players, but they brought in a lot of great pieces, and I'm super excited to see Jalen Suggs, an electric freshman from Minnesota who's a top 10 recruit, and that doesn't typically happen at Gonzaga. They have seniors typically lead the ship, and he will be new and bring some dynamism that I think could make them the best team in the country. And so I was happy to see them number 1. At Kansas, they lost Udoka Azubuike and Devin Dotson, both of whom were to the NBA and both of whom were first team and second team All-Americans. So they're replacing a lot, but it's a true blue blood over there in Lawrence, Kansas. They've won 16 of 17 Big 12 titles and should be ready to go and provide a great game for us.
It's going to be very interesting to see this happen regardless whenever you see top 10 matchups come in to play or especially early in the season with the first game happening. Let's hear your opinions on what Kansas lost compared to what they're bringing back, and how can they make this game competitive against the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, so Kansas, like I mentioned, they lost Azubuike and Dotson, which were 2 staples to their team. Kansas is typically reliant on a really good ball-in-hand point guard, which was Devon Dotson. And this year they'll be playing point guard who was their small forward last year, and Marcus Garrett, who's very good with the ball and passes well, but he doesn't present a scorer like they've had of the ilk of Frank Mason, Devontae Graham, Mario Chalmers, and all those guys before. So I think that'll be an interesting adjustment, and to me that would indicate they'd have to play a slower pace because they're less electric scoring the ball. And I think without Azubuike, they've got a really good replacement in David McCormick, who was forced to the bench because they couldn't play together due to both of them clogging up the paint. playing kind of a Twin Towers mold, and in modern basketball, it didn't really work. I think they're really adept at replacing talent. They'll play a nice starting lineup, in my opinion. That'll be Marcus Garrett at the point guard, who's an all-world defender. He'll be an interesting first matchup for Jalen Suggs. David McCormick will for sure start in the front court. Ochai Agbaji will be the small forward. And then at the power forward spot and filling in the shooting guard spot, you'll probably find a combination of Christian Brown, who's a sniper, who will really benefit from an empty gym, and Tristan Enarua or Tyon Grant Foster could factor in. But I personally think of freshman number 20 in the country, Bryce Thompson, will slot in at the shooting guard, and they'll play small ball next to David McCormick. So I think this will be a really fast-paced game, and Kansas's best shot is actually to slow it down. But I think Gonzaga will push it enough to make Kansas just say, hey, we're going to try to run.
Absolutely. Let's flip that script and get your same opinions on Kansas. I'm sorry, on Gonzaga, and hear what they can do to take control of this game and win that over Kansas.
I think they have a clearer path to beating Kansas than Kansas does to beating Gonzaga, because while they replace more players, I think no two players are more important to their team last year than Azubuike and Dotson. And while they lost the Pac-12 WCC Player of the Year in Petrusev, they always have a loaded bench of centers. And last year, Drew Timme was a freshman and emerged. He only scored 9.8 points and 5.4 points rebounds per game last season, but he is considered the front runner for WCC Player of the Year this year as a sophomore. They also returned Corey Kispert, who averaged 14 points per game and is an absolute sniper. Joel Ayayi, 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 3.2 assists, is a kind of a glue guy for that team. And Jalen Suggs, as I mentioned, is an electric point guard. So I think what their recipe for success is push the ball, use their superior athleticism and depth, shoot the ball, and play great offense, and let their defense have it just be enough for their offense to compensate, whereas Kansas has to stop the pace and tempo of Gonzaga to have a chance in this game, because I don't think they'll be able to score as efficiently, especially new into this season, losing their staples both offensively and defensively with Dotson and Azubuike gone.
It's going to be interesting to see that as well, seeing as Gonzaga was the number one team in the country last season in points per game. They averaged 87.4 there to lead the country, and then Kansas had an average of 74.6 points per game. So that kind of shed some light on that point for you as well. Do you have any kind of final thoughts to add about this game before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I got one more a thought on it, is that Kansas was clearly the top team in the country when we came to a close, and they have had a lot of bad luck in the tournament, and I think a lot of their fans are frustrated about them not being able to finish that season, and that provided motivation for this team. But also they were number one defensively by most metrics last season. Them and Virginia were the top two teams defensively in the country. And I think losing their anchor in Udoka Azubuike, averaged nearly 3 blocks a game, 14 points and 10 rebounds. Their defense will be very interesting to see how they change their strategy of funneling into the big man, or if they try to play more high ball pressure against a supercharged offense in Gonzaga, because this would have been a top defense versus the very top offense according to adjusted efficiencies. And that would have been quite a clash. And I still expect it to be quite a clash.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one for sure here to open up the season for both teams in this one. For those of you that can't tell through these first couple minutes here, Leif is the college basketball guy on this podcast show for everyone. He is Mr. College Basketball. So my role in terms of college basketball is going to be helping him facilitate through some of these points and getting them addressed to you while I learn alongside of all of you and get a little bit, even half up to speed with as well as he is. So we're gonna let Leif lead us through these first few weeks of college basketball until I have some better input to slide in there as well.
I lost so much from no March Madness. I decided to watch like 13 games the day it was canceled. So that is my pride and joy. I love college basketball. So if you can't tell, I'm so excited to bring it to you guys, and we're gonna get you a ton of great previews and analysis. So we're happy to bring it to you, and I certainly am.
It's going to be fun. I'm going to be learning alongside everyone else with you while doing this with you. So it's going to be great. I'm super excited for it. Okay, so before we touch on number 22 UCLA at San Diego State, Um, do you want to share some of the games that got canceled already due to Feast Week that were highlighted matchups, and what's the status of these, and if they're going to have different contenders or what?
Yeah, so we had a few board previews for you. We had number 2 Baylor going up against number 18 Arizona State, which was going to be a really interesting game. Baylor's head coach Scott Drew tested positive, but no one on the team did. But as a precaution, Arizona State, led by Coach Bobby Hurley, an ex-Duke point guard, decided that he didn't want his team playing, and maybe this was from up above, but anyway, Arizona State decided that they did not want to play against Baylor in that game. That game has been canceled, and Arizona State was looking to try to schedule another marquee matchup, which figured to be Virginia versus Florida, because Florida had positive tests and Virginia was left without a matchup. That those two didn't work it out, and it looks like Virginia, who will be playing a game not against Arizona State, but even though they're in the same bubble. So we had 2 games, Virginia and Florida, Arizona State and Baylor, both get canceled, as well as Tennessee and VCU, because of Tennessee had some positive tests, including Coach Rick Barnes, who's one of the more mainstay head coaches in the land. So we've got a lot of updates, and this will probably keep happening throughout the season, but we'll try to get you as many games as we can. And I think some of these games will go on and be rescheduled. So if there are any updates after we preview this, we apologize for the changes, but it's ever fluctuating.
We're used to it with football now. But speaking of football, just quickly, it's an interesting point to make with Florida. They had that outbreak in their football team a couple months ago where 35 plus people had COVID-19 on their football roster, and they said it was spreading to different athletes on their campus. So that's very interesting to now hear that Florida's basketball team has canceled their first game of the season due to positives in the Florida basketball program. So, and a little interesting anecdote and a side note there to add to that point as well. So with that being said, let's dive into number 22, UCLA at San Diego State. This is going to be at 10:30 Eastern time on CBS Sports Network. Let's talk about UCLA first. What do you make of them coming into this season, and are they the pride of the Pac-12 in your eyes?
Yeah, I think UCLA was one of the more intriguing basketball teams last season because they started off 8-9 under Mick Cronin, formerly of Cincinnati. He came in and did a fabulous job turning around an 8-9 team that wasn't riddled with stars like the Westwood teams typically are. They ended up on the season finishing 11-3, resulting in a 19-12 record, which doesn't look incredible. But they're 12-6 in the Pac-12, which resulted in second. And in my eyes, they are the favorites coming into the season because they return all their players. The coach is more familiar. The players are more familiar in the coach's system. And they bring in some talent. They brought in a Kentucky transfer, Johnny Juzang, who is a really good shooter and was a top 20 recruit a season ago. And they also bring in a 4-star freshman guard, Jalen Clark, while, like I said, returning their 5 starters and a few key bench pieces. So I do see them as the top team in the Pac-12. But I think the Pac-12 will be one of the more competitive conferences.
If you're a fan of this game, what is one player in your eyes that is going to make a difference for this UCLA team moving forward and could possibly give them the chance to win this game against San Diego State?
I think that's a great question because they're really balanced. I think the game and just basketball in general is ran by the point guard. So I'll highlight Tiger Campbell, who is a sophomore guard. He finished the season on a really high note, becoming more familiar with the system and leading more by example rather than faltering like he did a little bit early in the season. He averaged 8 points per game and 5 assists. And I think that he's the engine that'll run this team. He's the catalyst. One other guy that I think will be really important is Jalen Hill, who averaged 9 points and 7 rebounds. And I think as he continues to grow, the UCLA team will get better and better. But it'll be a super interesting matchup because UCLA only got better as the season went on, and they're playing San Diego State, who last season was 30-2. And so a lot of people see 22 UCLA and unranked San Diego State, and I think that's misrepresentative of where these track records of the teams are going, that they're both pointing upwards, and I think it'll continue into this season.
Absolutely. San Diego State was on the cusp of having one of their best seasons in school history before COVID-19 ruined their chances to make that a pretty significant run in the tournament. What do you make of them coming into this season? Do you think they have a chance to have similar successes, or do you think we'll see them fall back a little bit?
I think they'll take a step back just because they lost a ton, and it's just hard to have a season where you go 30-2. I don't think many teams, regardless of the program, can ever replicate that type of season. But Coach Brian Dutcher did amazing things. They were 30-2, 17-1 in the Mountain West Conference. They unfortunately ended with a bitter taste where Sam Merrill of Utah State hit a game-winning three to beat them in the Mountain West title game. And I think this team was better than even when San Diego State had Kawhi Leonard. And yeah, that's the same Kawhi Leonard that's an NBA All-Star and All-Pro. So that speaks to what he did there. But though they lose Malachi Flynn, who was a first-round pick, KJ Fegan, his crafty point guard, and Yanni Wetzel, their big man from New Zealand, I still think this San Diego State team can be a top 25 team as the season goes. And their key man is Matt Mitchell. Matt Mitchell played a supplementary role to Malachi Flynn. But he scored 12 a game with 5 rebounds, great defender, and a fabulous shooter as a shooting guard, small forward mold at 6'6", 240. He shot 87 from the free throw line and 39% from three. And I think he needs to have the ball in his hands more than he did a season ago. And if he can replicate any of that type of efficiency, this team has a legitimate chance to win the Mountain West again.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think they need to do you think there's any people in general that are going to need to have step up and play a bigger role in after losing what they lost after last season?
Yeah, for sure. And I think anytime you lose a guy like Malachi Flynn, you're going to need some good point guard play. So I think the biggest key player is Trey Pulliam. He's a junior point guard. He averaged 3 points per game and 2 rebounds, 2 assists. That was with Malachi Flynn at the helm, so he didn't play too much. But I think his role is integral to their success, taking care of the ball. And especially in this matchup against Tiger Campbell, I think the winner of this game is who limits turnovers, because teams will be rusty. You'll see mistakes, but whoever can lead their ship better is the team that I think is more likely to win. Another guy that's a huge needs to have a big season is junior Nathan Mensah. He's averaged 7 points and 7 rebounds, and he really came on end at the end of the season as a raw big man, but who showed skills, and he'll be integral in this game and as their season goes on, battling on the boards, providing an inside presence.
Give me your keys to this game. What's going to make the difference in this one?
I think the defense will likely be ahead of the offense, so rebounding is essential. UCLA rebounds really well on the offensive glass, but doesn't typically do a great job on the defensive glass, or at least they didn't last season. So San Diego State has to box out on their end and try for scrappy points and second chances. So whoever wins the second chance points, I think, could have a really good chance in this game. Like I mentioned a few times, shooters do really well in empty gyms. We saw this with Duncan Robinson in the bubble, and so many players having really elevated percentages. So watch for Jaime Jaquez and new transfer Johnny Juzang for the Bruins to shoot very well, and Jordan Shakal and Matt Mitchell of the Aztecs to splash. And Shakal, I forgot to mention this, averaged 44% from 3 last season. And as a team, San Diego State averaged 38% from 3. So I think while the defense should be ahead of offenses, shooting may be good. It just might be some of the execution. You might see a lot of turnovers, but some excellent shooting. So watch for some high 3-point numbers in this game. And then lastly, I think I mentioned it a little bit. I think who controls the game better between Campbell and Pulliam will be the decider of this game. And I lean towards Tiger Campbell doing so because he grew into a role as a freshman and is only going to get better, whereas Pulliam is a junior and has had limited minutes.
Very nice. There you have it. Those are the keys to the game between San Diego State and UCLA, 10:30 Eastern time there on CBS Sports Network. We're gonna update some our own top. We're gonna offer you our top 5s after this first week, after we see some of these teams play for the first time. I need to get my berries underneath me to see with my own eyes who the best teams in the country are. Do you have any thoughts about that before we start? Give us some hints. Where you lean?
I'll give a rough one. I like to see it as well, but as someone who's studied it extensively, I think the best team that got it right, I think it's Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga has all the pieces to be exceptional this year. They run and gun. They pass the ball phenomenally. They'll score 90 points routinely, which is ridiculous in a 40-minute game at the pace college is played at typically. I think their team will be phenomenal. So that's my number one. I think my number two is probably Villanova. I think Villanova returns a veteran point guard in Colin Gillespie. They have Jeremiah Robinson Earl coming back as a sophomore big man and more than sufficient wings. I think my number three is Virginia, the defending national champs. They have an interesting change in pace this year. They've got a lot of really good offensive players, whereas last year they only averaged 57 points per game and allowed even fewer. I think number four, I see one disclaimer is Baylor is ranked number two in this poll, but they just lost their big man for the season, Tristan Clark. So I think that drops them significantly. Number four, this is getting tough. Let's see, who would I put it for? I think one of the Big Ten representatives between Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois will be up there. And then I think Duke, as much as they're not as talented this year as many people are, the pundits are saying because they don't have a Zion Williamson, I think Duke is probably going to round out my top five based on what I've been seeing from preseason scrimmages, intra-squad scrimmages. They look impressive, led by Jalen Johnson, Wendell Moore, and Matt Hurt. So that's my top five. Very rough. Don't quote me on any of that. I'll get you a better top five once I see some basketball.
We all will for sure. So appreciate you giving your thoughts and your opinions here. Do you have anything else to add before we sign off on this basketball preview for the week, or are we good here?
We got some other games that are going on. We can give our predictions for. These will be tough if you want to do that.
Sure, let's do it. Go for it.
All righty. So we got, as we mentioned, we got San Diego State versus UCLA at Viejas Stadium at San Diego State. Who do you have in this one?
I'll probably just go UCLA due to their pedigree. I know San Diego State had the great year last year, but it's hard to follow up some of those performances sometimes. So I'll go UCLA after their hot start finishing and their coaching level and their pedigree in the Pac-12. I'll go UCLA in this one.
I think I agree. I think they return more talent and that they're more proven. So I agree on this one. I expect it to be close, though. I think this will be a kind of a chippy game, and whoever has fewer turnovers will win, as I mentioned. So I'll go UCLA as well. We got Seton Hall and Louisville on Friday the 27th. Two basketball-rich programs that aren't necessarily in their highest years after pretty good years last season. Who do you have in this one?
I don't know. This is tough. I see Seton Hall all the time in my NCAA March Madness brackets. I feel like I pick them more often than some of the other teams. So I recognize that name, but also Louisville is one of those prestigious basketball schools having very good years year after year. So I'm probably going to go Louisville in this one just because they, like I touched on with UCLA, they have the pedigree for me that screams more consistent than the Seton Hall.
Yeah, this is a really tough game. I think Louisville lost their big men for the start of the year. They'll be out a little bit. And Seton Hall lost Miles Powell, who was the most prolific scorer in college basketball the last season. I'm going to take Seton Hall in this one. I have no legitimate reason. I just think that they've got Sandro Mamukelashvili, quite a name, and he's a talented big man, and Louisville is going to play a true freshman big. So I'm gonna bank on Mamukelashvili to take me home here. But I think that you may have something right about pedigree, and watch out for everyone watching that game. Watch David Johnson versus Bryce Aiken at the point guard spot. That'll be really fun to watch. We got Gonzaga and Auburn. That'll be the 27th after Gonzaga plays the 26th, Thanksgiving Day, for against Kansas. But we've got Gonzaga and Auburn. Auburn is just made a Final Four appearance, the last Final Four we've had. Bruce Pearl is building a big-time program. So who do you got in this one?
Yeah, like you touched on, Auburn's coming off a couple of very good years, ranked in the SEC. I don't know. I just think the way you framed up Gonzaga for their game against Kansas, I think they'll just have a little bit too much firepower for that Auburn team. I think it's going to be a really good game. I think with the pedigree that Auburn brings in to this one as well, it's going to be close and it's going to be fun to watch. But I'll roll with Gonzaga to stay the number one team in the country against Auburn and win both these tough games back to back to start their season.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Auburn is losing a lot of players that were there for that tournament run and then the following season, and they'll be banking on freshmen. And I trust Mark Few and Gonzaga more than I do some freshmen that are really going to have to outscore an Auburn team. Bet the over in that game probably. That'll be really fast paced. And so unless it's really, really sloppy, which I don't foresee it being too bad, that'll be a high-scoring game. But I've got Gonzaga as well. Next up, we're going to keep it in the WCC. We're going to give some love to a conference that doesn't play football. So the WCC, we've got St. Mary's and Randy Bennett's Australian bunch versus Memphis and Penny Hardaway. Who do you have in this one?
I'm gonna go St. Mary's. I think every little pick sequence, I gotta give a shout out to a team that you don't necessarily hear from, or quote unquote the underdog. I don't know if St. Mary's is actually the underdog in this game or not, but Memphis is one of those teams that has pedigree, has experience having good seasons. They are a basketball school in my opinion, even though they've been having better years football wise. I'm gonna go St. Mary's to roll in this one and beat Memphis.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because both teams are losing talent. They lost James Wiseman and Precious Achua for Memphis, and Jordan Ford is gone at St. Mary's, as well as Malik Pitts. So I wonder – I don't know who's going to win this game. I think I'm going to go with Memphis, though, because typically St. Mary's has a veteran guard, and I don't think they do this season to supplement their offense, which is beautiful to watch. One of my favorite teams to watch in terms of offensive stylistic qualities. But I think I'm just going to roll with raw athletes at Memphis and Penny Hardaway because he brings in a lot of talent. And he also brought in a transfer named Landers Nolly from Virginia Tech. But yeah, no, that game's a toss-up in my mind, and it's whoever comes out sharper. And St. Mary's is really well coached, so I'm nervous to bet against Randy Bennett and company. So the last game before we go to our game of the week, Gonzaga and Kansas, there's Colorado from the Pac-12 and Kansas State from the Big 12. Two teams with really solid basketball programs that go under the radar. Who are you taking in this one?
I'm going to go Colorado. Just strictly, I've seen them play in the last few years. I don't really know a whole lot about Kansas State out of the Big 12 for their basketball program, at least. So I'm going to go Colorado in this one. I've seen them play Utah a couple times. I've seen them play Oregon really tough. I just know that they have, like you touched on, they have a program where they just compete and they play really, really good basketball. So I'm going to roll with Colorado to take on Kansas State.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one. I think that McKinley Wright is back for Colorado, and they do a really good job on defense. And when you have a senior returning guard of all Pac-12 caliber like McKinley Wright, that bodes well in an early season where a lot of teams are scrambling. So without further ado, let's go to our game of Feast Week, as we dubbed it for this podcast. Gonzaga versus Kansas. And you mentioned that you thought Gonzaga was going to win both their games. So I'm assuming you're sticking with that. And what do you got for a score, like a rough score estimate?
Man, that's going to be the tough one for me. I am going to pick Gonzaga. I know Kansas is one of those blue blood basketball programs. Bill Self's an excellent coach to there at Kansas, but I'm just going to go Gonzaga. I think coming into this game, they have the talent to replace what they've lost more so than Kansas does. So I'm going to go, and like you touched on, with just being able to push the ball and score points against this Kansas team. And if Kansas is going to have to rely on slowing the ball down and limiting Gonzaga's possessions, especially week one where turnovers are prudent and mistakes happen, I'll go Gonzaga to outscore Kansas in this one. I'll probably go around like 78-65 for me personally.
Solid. Yeah. I agree with you. I think for the same reasons, I'm going Gonzaga. I think if you have a team that can score at such a clip, regardless of who's playing, and then you add a lot of talent as they did, it'll be hard for Kansas to keep up with the pace. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. Like I mentioned, Gonzaga really gets up and down the court. I think Kansas will try to match that at least for a portion of this game. I'm going to go with Gonzaga 82, Kansas 71, something like that. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I think it'll be close throughout, but Gonzaga's a little too much, and at the end of the game, they'll get into a little free throw game, and and stretch it out. So those are my predictions, and we're going to have a lot more info to tell you guys once we see who actually plays based off coronavirus and everything. Once everyone's actually playing, we're going to have some top 5 predictions, conference predictions, who's going to win each conference, and a whole lot more basketball wise, and we're going to keep up our football. So thank you for tuning into the initial basketball one, and we're excited to watch some basketball. We're excited to keep you up with football and basketball. So thank you for tuning into the College Sports Hive. You got anything?
Nope, that's gonna do it. We'll see you all on Wednesday for our preview and news episode. We're gonna combine it for football this week, and we'll get you ready for your games for Thanksgiving, for the Thanksgiving weekend, and then we'll be back once more this week for Saturday. Twice more, I guess, this week. Saturday for another basketball one, and then Sunday we'll recap what happened in the realm of football. Our lives got busier. We got another major college sport in the mix, so we're excited to bring you some more information and do something other than football. So that's going to do it for us, and we'll see you all on Wednesday.
Have a good one.